There we go. It's now showing up.
Yeah, it's just buffering.
Here's Christine Baker as well.
Excellent. Good, good. Right. Well, should we get started? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this virtual meeting of Waverley's Housing Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name's Councillor Richard Seaborn, and I chair this committee. I'm supported this evening by a number of officers. So we've got with us our Housing Needs Manager, Mike Rivers, Service Improvement Manager, Annalisa Howson, Head of Housing Operations, Hugh Wagstaff, Head of Housing Delivery and Communities, Andrew Smith, Corporate Policy Manager, Louise Norrie, Scrutiny Officer, Mark Mills, who we're welcoming to his first Waverley Housing ONS meeting this evening. So very big welcome, Mark. We're looking forward to seeing you regularly in the future. And then we've got two Democratic Services officers, Georgina Hall, who's going to be clerking the meeting, and Kimberly Sion, who's going to be managing the technology for us this evening, pedaling as hard as she can. I'd also like to welcome Anne-Marie Rosamond, who's portfolio holder for housing, who I've invited specifically to be available for questions relating to agenda item 8, which covers the proposed housing revenue account budget. Please can you use the hand raise function within Zoom to indicate if you wish to speak, and at all other times, please can you keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. If any members in the meeting lose their connection temporarily, we will pause to allow them time to rejoin the meeting. And if the webcam stream fails, then we'll adjourn until we're able to reset the connection and be back in the public domain. Okay, so that's the formalities. If we can move to agenda item 1, which is the minutes of meeting held on the 23rd of November. We need to approve those. They've been available on the Waverley website for some time. Do any members wish to raise any points of accuracy in relation to these minutes? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up, in which case would members please unmute and indicate approval of those minutes.
Great.
Great.
Excellent, thanks very much. Just to go through the formalities, Georgina, the situation with apologies and substitutions.
Apologies from Dennis Smith, substituted by Gillian Martin.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome, Gillian. Thanks very much for standing in. Item 3, declarations of interest. Have there been any declarations of interest received?
None received.
Okay, thank you. And do any members present this evening wish to offer any declarations in relation to the material we're going to be covering? No, okay, no hands up, so no declarations. Have we received any questions from members of the public?
None.
And have we received any questions from members of the council?
None.
In which case, that takes us on to the substance of the meeting. Agenda item 6 is a short verbal update on the homelessness situation by Housing Needs Manager, Mike Rivers. So, Mike, can I give you the floor, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my name's Mike Rivers, Housing Needs Manager. Yeah, really just a very brief update. We currently have 2 households in temporary accommodation who we're sort of accommodating as a result of the offer to try and get people who are under risk of rough sleeping off the street. So we've got two people in temporary accommodation. We also have 3 clients in the York Road project, which are in pre-purchased bed spaces that we have with them. The official rough sleep account that we did in November, and I can't recall if I've previously fed this back to the committee, depending on the timing of it, was we reported 3 rough sleepers. Currently, we're aware there's a possibility of 1 rough sleeper who up to now has refused offers of temporary accommodation. And I wanted to flag up one positive work which we with all the Surrey boroughs have done together with Surrey County Council and Transform Housing, and that is the development of modular units, particularly to help with COVID positive cases of homeless people. And there's a series of these sort of modular units in Elmbridge and Reigate and Banstead. And so that's been a very good example of joint working across the 11 districts and boroughs and Surrey County Council and Transform Housing. The only remaining thing to flag up is, the housing options team are continuing to deliver our statutory homelessness service remotely. So clients are contacting us by phone, and officers are providing our homelessness service through advice online. So I'll open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Does anyone wish to ask Mike anything? No, I think it's a case of very little news is pretty good news.
Yeah.
Councillor Baker would like to ask you something. Go ahead, Councillor Baker.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm glad to hear that we have found accommodation for some of them, even if one of them is holding out. Can I just say that I think that we heard at the last housing ONS meeting that we'd been awarded 2 pods for homelessness by the government. And because we're talking about homelessness now, I'm just wondering how things have been going in as regards discussions with planning and whether we have a location for those pods. Hope that's the right terminology, but I remember what we discussed. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, we do. We have had to amend the location from our original bid. And maybe if I hand over to Andrew and Louisa, who can maybe update about the latest position with planning and proposed sites.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm happy to do that. Yes, we had identified one site. Now we're looking more closely at another site. We've not submitted a planning application yet. We're seeking pre-app advice, but it looks suitable. There has been an enormous amount of bureaucratic paperwork for 2 pods, which we think we've just about done now. Louisa and her team are discussing with the provider of the pods how that will work. I think the thing that will take the time for us, we have a deadline that's set by MHCLG the 31st of March. And if I can share something amusing with the committee at the beginning, if I may, at the Surrey Chief Housing Officers Association meeting not so long ago, we were talking about this, and our representative from Homes England was there, but it's a joint piece of work between MHCLG and Homes England. And I was quite realistic. I think for us to deliver it by the 31st of March is going to be tight. Shouldn't be too much longer after that. I said, will I have to sit on the naughty step if we don't make the 31st of March? And the representative from Homes England said, you'll have to find a lap because everybody will be sitting on the naughty step. The thing is that I think there's been some quite unrealistic sort of timelines put in for delivery. And a number of us were able to receive funding, and we're working as hard as we can. So the progress thus far is good. I think the thing that will take the time is the planning, because planning does take a while because of consultation and everything else. But hopefully at the next committee meeting in March, we should be able to give you a really good update of the fact that, we're well on the way to delivering these pods. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I just say, I'm very pleased to hear, and all power to Andrew Smith-Elbow and his, I'm sure he will enhance the naughty step if he gets on it. Thank you.
Indeed. Right. Okay. There is no recommendation accompanying this particular agenda item, and I don't think we've heard anything that requires us to put our weight behind it. So, as ever, Michael, thanks very much. You're doing a great job. You continue to do a great job, and the borough should be very grateful that we have such a conscientious and effective team looking after our homelessness situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll pass on thanks to the team. Thank you.
Good. Right. So agenda item 7 is the Recovery, Change and Transformation Project update as applied to housing. You have a written report, but it's a fairly chaotic and fast-moving situation at the moment for everybody. So I'll ask Annalisa Howson, our Service Improvement Manager, to give us brief highlights and alert us to any changes that have developed since the report was written.
Thank you. As I said, I'm Annalisa Howson. I'm the Housing Service Improvement Manager, and I've been reporting the progress of the Recovery, Change and Transformation project to this committee for the last few meetings. Since the end of the initial lockdown last spring, the Housing Service set objectives to make sure we could recover our services and in most areas try to catch up with works that hadn't been completed during the lockdown. We split that into different objectives, and as you can see from the report. So the first objective was regarding rents. We've continued to collect rent in an empathetic way, giving residents support and guidance and signposting to different agencies as required. The national average for social housing rent arrears is at 3%, and at Waverley we're just under the 1%. So we continue to be performing well, even though we're not meeting our original targets. This report was written before Christmas, but as at the end of December, I can tell you that there was £290,000 worth of arrears. And 872 tenants had made a universal credit claim, and this is 400 more residents than we had at the 1st of March. So you can see the impact that the pandemic has had on people. We're also waiting for further government guidance since the report was first written because of the new national lockdown, and we expected that there would be a continuation on the stay of evictions following the Christmas period. That has been extended, and we expect it's going to be extended again as well. So that means that we can't, no landlord can evict anybody at the current time. We can take legal action for the most severe cases, but for rent arrears, we wouldn't be getting a bailiff appointment. But we're in the position where that's not the action we were seeking to take. We have one case with very high arrears, but we wouldn't be taking legal action for that case because there's a question about the mental capacity of that tenant. Moving on to letting homes, we have been making some headway with the dealing with the backlog of empty homes we had during that spring period. We relet 98 homes in Q3. Unfortunately, the average for that was we relet them in an average of 60 working days, which, as you know, is way off our 20 working day target. However, 19 of them were let within target, and we are making steps to improve that performance and reduce that backlog. Looking at responsive repairs, we've moved into the season where the request for repairs increases with the weather we've been having, wind, rain, snow, all correlates with the number of responsive repairs we receive. Again, we've been managing to clear that backlog and making headway to get into people's homes and doing that work. With gas, just to give you an update, as at the end of December, we had 99.8% compliance with gas safety certificates. That means that at the end of December, there were 5 homes without a gas safety certificate. We managed to access one of those homes in early January. 2 of the homes have tenants who are shielding and very vulnerable, so don't currently wish to have a gas safety certificate. We're continuing to talk with them, but their boilers are relatively new, so there's a real low risk of any issue there. And the other 2 homes, we're continuing to try and contact those residents, and we'll be escalating if we can't gain access. And finally, the Capital Works programme. The budget was reforecast because we knew we wouldn't be able to spend the original budget we had intended for this year. But saying that, 50% of the budget has now been allocated and is committed. So the saving of the 50% we won't spend this year has already been identified and, as I say, forecasted within the budget. So in conclusion, we have implemented new ways of working. I think you might remember I shared a photograph of one of our gas operatives, fully PP'd up with his suit and his mask and the goggles and the gloves. And we're continuing to adapt and respond to the changing environment that we're working in. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, over to members. Councillor Marriott, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. A good question on the repairs, responsive repairs. You talk about 200-ish, saying that you have to deal with. Is there a theme in those repairs you see more often?
I'm not actually close enough to the ground to see that. That's information I can find and share with you at a later date. But generally, when it's been windy, we get roof responsive repairs requests. When people turn their heating on for the first time, we get heating requests. And I see that Hugh's got his hand up, so he might have a more concrete answer than myself.
Chair, all I was going to say is that that's the kind of number that we would expect. So if Councillor Marriott was suggesting if it was a higher or lower, that's around the number we would expect in that particular that kind of time in June.
No, I was thinking if there were issues that could feed into the future house standards, things that you were aware of. That you
yes. Okay, so Peter can pick this up later in later agenda items, but that'd be one of the things when we look at the asset management strategy. Peter will be looking at the trends in terms of responsive repairs, because generally we would look to actually be proactive rather than reactive in our maintenance of our stock, and that would be one of the key things that Peter would be looking to do, that we invest in proactive measures rather than reactive, i.e. it could be more planned maintenance, more cyclical maintenance, and we will continue to develop that. But Peter can pick that up when we look at the asset management strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Hugh. I've got Councillor Goodrich, the hand up. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, two matters. Are there many people who want responsive repairs done, then give us a problem in not allowing us in to do it because of the COVID situation? Because clearly it makes life even more difficult for our people. And are we getting good cooperation and help from Ian Williams and his team, in that he's doing things satisfactory from our point of view?
Chair, shall I come back on that? I mean, as far as I'm aware, no, I don't think there's a problem with people ordering repairs then not allowing us in. So I don't think that's an issue. In terms of Ian Williams and their processes, and that's with the gas contractor as well. They've all looked at the regulations that have come out to the government and are applying for them. So apart from right from the beginning, I've heard no feedback that they're not following proper processes, safe processes, and taking care and attention. I know it was another contractor, but I think Terry sort of confirmed that he had someone come to his home, and they followed a strict regime in terms of safe working. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, just to add, we've got a risk assessment before anybody goes into a home, and we will call people to ask whether they're shielding, whether they've been in contact with anybody who's had the virus, do they have any symptoms, to protect the operatives and the tenant.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got no more hands up, so I'll take my turn in the queue. Can I ask Annalisa, have we the situation where we are precluded from evictions and that we're not carrying out any court action at the moment? It feels absolutely the right thing to do, but you know, are we actually building up a bit of a logjam of a problem that is going to burst when the situation changes? Do you anticipate much, or are you going to be on top of the problem by talking to families with problems, so that we don't have to resort to serious action when the situation changes.
Yeah, I don't believe we're storing up a problem for the future. The team are actively engaged with tenants who are struggling to pay their rent or who have arrears. And we can see by the number of people who've made a universal credit claim, they're getting advice, they're making the claim, they're then able to pay their rent. I think nationally, nobody's going to be rushing to evict people as we come out of lockdown, hopefully at some point this year. But there is flexibility within the system that if we do have somebody who's got 6 months rent arrears, then we are able to serve notice and take those legal steps. And as we've seen before, sometimes it takes serving a legal notice for people to pay attention and actually act. We've seen it with access for gas safety, and we see it with rent arrears as well. Sometimes a legal notice is just what somebody needs to make them recognise the seriousness of their situation.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you. And can I just ask a question from a personal ward perspective? I don't know, either yourself, Annalisa, or perhaps Hugh can answer that. And that's I'd be interested to hear how work's progressing at Blunden Court. The residents there, quite reasonably, are not slow in calling me when they have problems, and I've had no calls, which indicates matters are going really well. But it'd be nice just to confirm that.
Yes, I understand it's going really well. I'm just trying to check. I think I put something in my report. I'm just
I'll just come in on that
to check. But all external works have been completed, and we're now looking to start work. Oh, sorry, Hugh.
Oh, that's fine. You go.
Have I frozen?
No.
Okay. We're now starting to do internal works in people's homes, and that's been going really well. And we've got a flat set up for people to move to or be in while work's been done in their home if necessary.
Good. Okay, that's good news. Right, so there's no more questions as far as I can see. The recommendation.
Chairman, I have my hand up.
I beg your pardon.
Sorry, Chairman. I have my hand up.
Yeah, please go ahead. Sorry.
That's all right. I just wanted to ask Annalise on the question of evictions, and obviously it is most serious when people are evicted. But if you have a family that is evicted, I mean, what is the outcome? Because if they're still within our area, are we still responsible for their well-being and where they live? Does that still stand?
Yes, I mean, and that's why eviction would always be the last resort. And as a local authority, we have a duty to anybody who's threatened with homelessness or who is homeless. So we would normally make contact with the homelessness team if we were going to be going down that route, so that they can contact the tenants as well to let them know the seriousness of the situation, because there's various eligibility criteria you have to go through to be actually provided with accommodation if you are homeless. So we do work together, and I think the whole team would deem it a failure if we did have to go through an eviction. But we've got a really good track record of keeping people in their homes and getting affordable repayment plans in place.
Chair, can I just come in to reinforce Annalisa's point and go back onto your question? I mean, in business as usual years, we would very rarely evict anyone. It's like a handful of people that we would actually evict, and usually by then they've left the tenancy in any case. So even if there's a build-up of cases, there would be literally a couple of cases if we needed to go to that length. But as I say, it's really hard to overemphasize what the team does in terms of encouraging, supporting people to pay their rent. That has always been our traditional way of collecting the rent and supporting people. Yes, as Annalisa says, serving a notice does help and sort of gets people moving. But as I say, we very rarely get to that eviction stage.
Okay, that's excellent to hear. Right, okay. So I think I genuinely have no hands left up now. So the recommendation for this particular item is that the committee reviews the report and agrees any observations or comments it which wishes to pass to the executive. Well, we've reviewed it, and all the comments have been comfortably answered, and I'm not sure that there's actually any observations we need to pass on, other than probably commending the committee for the sensitive approach that they're taking under difficult circumstances to our tenants. So unless anyone has any objections to that as a comment to pass upwards, we'll leave it at that. Okay, I'm not seeing any violent disagreement being expressed. Quite a few nods, so okay, we'll leave it at that. Thank you. Right, now to the star of this evening's show, item 8, the housing revenue account, business plan, the revenue budget, and the capital programme. And to introduce this, we've got Lindsay Kennedy, housing finance manager. And as I said earlier, I've invited Anne-Marie Rosamond tonight, who is portfolio holder, to be available to answer any questions around relating to the executive's thinking behind particular recommendations. So our job is to consider the proposals and share any observations with the executive. Right, over to you, Lindsay, with your usual excellent set of well-prepared slides.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is the second budget I presented. I did one for my first time at Waverley last year, and I presented a training budget, a training session just before the committee meeting. So this year, Chairman Councillor Seaborn has asked me to put some slides together to really bring the numbers alive. And as we go through it, you'll see that finance is integral to the whole budget. And it's not just a finance thing, the finances tell a story. So I'll be relying on my colleagues in the core programme, Peter David and Louisa Bandel, for the new housing development, because this is where the money is coming. The money is coming in, and then this is where we're spending it. So before I ask Kimberly to move on to the slides, so as a council who owns council stock, we maintain a 30-year rolling business plan. Year one is always the year we're coming into. So effectively, this plan shows the amount of income and expenditure throughout that 30 years. And one of the crucial things to note is that in approving the budget for 21-22, it's the realisation that that is going to impact all future years of the business plan. The next slide, Kimberly, please. So the objective, and I don't have many slides, and I've tried to use pictures as much as possible. It's really to show what the key features are in the proposed revenue and capital budgets. So the other important thing to notice about the new budget is it assumes business as usual. And one of the really important things here is that a few months ago, I was budgeting a void percentage of higher than it actually is now, because because of the pandemic, we were suffering longer voids. Thankfully, this has now come back down to normal, and Waverley has a really good void percentage of around 1%, and that's really good in the industry. So the 21-22 budget will be a business as usual budget. So next slide, please, Kimberly. So the next slide, these are the highlights of the HRA business plan for 21-22. So in particular, what I'm talking about is what's happening for the proposed budget next year. So we've got total income of £30.3 million. And I put in brackets here the 1.25% rent rise, and I'm going to come back to that. The dwellings rent accounts for 95% of income to the HRA, so it really is key. It's one of the key items in the whole budget, because it's so important on the future years of how much money we have available for our core programs. So we have stock maintenance, and this is so these are the first two items are in Annex 1. So just as a flavour of what the 5.1 covers, it covers such things as asbestos surveys, and we need asbestos surveys in conjunction with our core programme. So we're putting in new kitchens and bathrooms, and very often the homes are very old and they do have asbestos in them. So before we do any work, we do asbestos surveys. It also covers external decoration, And in 21-22, I've budgeted for £3.9 million for responsive repairs. And that also covers boiler servicing in that figure, the 5.1 figure. The next point down is the core programme. This is the core capital programme, £5.8 million. This is Annex 3.1. This covers things such as heating upgrades, the aids and adaptations, the kitchens and bathrooms, windows and doors and new roofs. And you'll notice that this year I've actually put on the face of Annex 3.1 an aids and adaptation budget for two particular projects, two properties rather. Next point down is we have over the next 5 years we're delivering 153 new homes, and that's a net gain of 79. So that's come through on the Annex 3.2. The next one point down is closely aligned to that because it's right to buy. We are currently losing about 15 properties each year through right to buy, and that has a direct impact on our future income stream. Next one down is the opening reserve. So I put the opening reserves as of the 1st of April 2020. Obviously, the closing reserves are there for the opening reserves for 21-22 is going to be directly impacted on our closing reserves this year. So at the moment, if we, all things being equal, if we spent our entire budget, we'd have opening reserves of £42 million. So that obviously is dependent on the underspend in the current year, and we will have underspend because of COVID-19. Next slide, please, Kimberly. So this is just the flavour of what the capital reserves look like. These were the closing reserves at the end of last year. So you can see that we've got very healthy reserves, but we're not of nearly £49 million, but we're not just building reserves for the sake of it. We do have plans for this money. And that's another important aspect of the whole business plan. Next one, so the next slide is on the rent. So if you move to the next slide, please, Kimberly. So the reason why, so you'll see this extract in the budget paper itself. So one of the key reasons we have proposed a rent increase is that we use this for capital reinvestment, not only for the core programme, but also the new housing development. And if you see that in conjunction with the lost properties to right to buy, that's why it's really, really critical. So in terms of the actual numbers, you've already got the budget in your budget paper at the moment. So I'm not going to say much more on this, apart from to say that the maximum rent rise that we were permitted under government policy was 1.5%, which is 1% plus CPI. CPI had been fairly low in September with 0.5%. So the decision and the proposal is to increase, instead of the 1% additional, it's 0.75%, so a total of 1.25%. So you have the numbers in front of you. Over 5 years, by increasing by 1.25%, the lost reserves are, the loss to the reserves is nearly 400,000. That's really lost rental opportunity. Over 30 years, that's 2.86 million. So the next slide, please. So this is concerning Annex 3.1. So this is the core capital programme, and as I said, it relates to things like the kitchens and bathrooms, things that are tangible that you can see as you drive through your borough and look at our wonderful housing stock. So the next, I've chosen to show this data on a pie chart. So you've got the numbers already, but I've put it on a pie chart. And what I've done is I have taken the liberty of condensing some of the items simply because I think it's easier to see if I've grouped things together. So if you just go around it, so we've got £5.1 million. This is on Annex 3.1. So we've got £1.3 million. And to put this into context, for kitchens and bathrooms, that equates to around 145 kitchens, 164 bathrooms. But obviously we can switch that around, and we've had to, in fact, during the current financial year, because of COVID-19, we've had to switch more over to the bathrooms rather than kitchens, because it obviously takes longer to install a new kitchen, and with the risk of lockdown, we can't leave our tenants without a working kitchen. So we have switched the program around. So we're constantly looking at COVID-19, and then that's directly impacting what we actually spend on our programs. So I put safety and compliance, £845,000 there. That covers things like asbestos removal, which I've already mentioned. So we do asbestos surveys in the revenue side of the maintenance program. But now when we're actually putting in the new kitchens and bathrooms, we're doing the asbestos removal. So it also covers fire and Legionella protection and the repairs to electrics. Another big slice of the money is on structural works, and that is around £660,000, and it covers major refurbishment, structural and damp, and internal remodelling. And then we've got, as you go around the pie chart, I've got things like roofing. We've got 35. That budget there covers 35 roofs. We've got a windows and doors budget. Now, the current year, we forecast that down to zero simply because we didn't have a contractor, but we have put it in, we've decided to put it in the budget for next year, and that would cover roughly around 112 properties, depending on whether they were flats or a house. Then we've got the aids and adaptations budget. That covers mainly things like work rooms, and we also have 2 properties listed on Annex 3.1. So next slide. If anyone has any questions, by the way, I meant to say, if anyone has any questions while I'm going through the slides, you can either ask me during these slides or at the end, either way. So the next slide relates to the housing delivery budget. This is Louisa's area. So what I've done, we can go to the next slide, Kimberly. So this is the budget for next year. It's £18.3 million. And you can see the scope of how much money we're spending, say, for example, on Oxford Ridge. So £7.5 million on the right-hand side in the blue, well, different colours of blue, but this one. We've also got land and asset purchase, £4.5 million. And this is becoming quite significant because this is when we buy from developers through Section 106 agreements. So Louisa might have some words to say on this particular thing. Overall, most of these budgets you've already seen. However, we do have some new budget in the 21-22 budget proposal, and that's at Turner's Mead and at Springfield. So next slide, please, Kimberly. So this slide, what I'm doing here is showing you the change over last year's business plan as to this year's business plan. So the crucial year here is 22-23, and we've got an £8 million growth, and it's mainly led by 3 new budgets, and that's at Springfield 3.4, Oxford Ridge Site E 1.7 million, and Turner's Mead £0.2 million. So the last slide is, Kimberly, please. So this is a summary of what I've been saying. We have total income of £30.3 million, of which dwellings rent accounts for £28.8 million, and that's after the 1.25% increase. We've got a core capital budget in 21-22 of £5.8 million. The housing development budget in 21-22 is 18.3, and the capital budget estimates between 22-23 and 23-24 is £35.4 million, and you've got those figures in the various annexes. So next slide, I think that's just if you like, that's the end of my presentation. So if you'd like to ask me any questions, I'm also going to draw on my Waverley colleagues if they would like to chip in.
Right, thanks very much, Lindsay. We've already got Councillor Baker's hand up, so go ahead, Councillor Baker, please.
Right, well, thank you very much for going through all those figures. I think it was a helpful reminder. We did have to study them quite closely, I think, when we prepared for the meeting, but it's very good to be reminded. I have a very simple question, which isn't really strategic at all. I'd like to know about Turner's Mead in Chiddingfold. I'm just interested to know what's planned for Turner's Mead. Thank you.
Well, I can tell you some numbers, and then maybe if Louisa wants to pick in. Right, Turner's Mead, there are going to be 2 new properties there. So it's a net gain of 2.
Thank you. That's good to know. I know it's not the only thing happening in Chillingfold, but thank you very much.
Right, Louisa, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, just to confirm that Turners Mead was one of 4 sites which were proposed through the neighbourhood plan. So it'll join the other 3 sites when we go out for procurement of bill contractor, subject to planning, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I've got 4 hands up at the moment. Oh, well, I guess it's 3 because Councillor Baker's hand is still up. But what I would suggest we do is that there are actually 8 recommendations. And if I take comments at random, then we're going to be struggling to match the questions and observations against the particular recommendations. So I'm going to suggest that we go through each recommendation in turn, and I'll invite colleagues to ask their questions in relation to that specific recommendation and make observations so that we capture this in an orderly manner. So that the first of those is that the rent level for council dwellings be increased by 1.25% from the current level, with effect from April the 1st this year, within the permitted guidelines contained within the government's rent setting policy. So does anyone wish to ask a question in relation to the rent levels? So I've got Councillor Cole's hand up. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, thank you, John. In the presentation, which is very clear, you did pull out that an effect of COVID-19, the COVID-19 outbreak on this is indirect, in that the CPI is low, as presumably as effect of the downturn in the economy, and that is affects that number. Are there any other, just through the CPI in itself, are there any other effects of COVID-19, the COVID-19 outbreak, which in the end impact on that, the final number of 1.25%? Has there been any other constraint or effect which is makes that number what it is? I have some other comments, Chairman, but I'll go through them as we go down the list.
Lovely, thank you.
You want me to answer that, or Councillor Rosamond?
If you'd like to go first, Lindsay.
I put together a number, as I did last year, a number of different scenarios for evaluation. And this particular one was decided, it was discussed at the executive, and it was a proposed percentage from the executive. So there were a number of different scenarios that could be looked at.
Okay, and was the effect of the outbreak a factor in that choice between those scenarios?
Well, it was because of the economic climate. So, and we know that CPI is directly impacted by the COVID-19. The Bank of England have been very clear about that.
Okay,
but that was the only effect. The effect is constrained of the COVID-19 outbreak is only appears in these numbers through the CPI.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just to clarify what Councillor Cole is saying? So I think that this budget that's been set is that we assume business as usual, i.e. we can get into people's homes and we can carry out the capital programme. I'm not sure if that's what you're trying to clarify.
But that might have been an effect. If you'd said we can't do this because of that, then that would be an effect. So you're saying that business as usual is assumed otherwise in this budget.
That's basically, we assume it's business as usual, that we can get into people's homes and get on with the work. So that's why we've got the full budgets. Yes.
So if COVID-19 never happened, we'd be sat here probably discussing the same budget but with a different CPI.
Yes, probably.
Personally.
Yeah. To first order. Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you. That's very clear.
Good. Okay. So I don't have any other questions on that. If I might take advantage of having Councillor Rosamond with us, can you just let us know how the executive arrived at the decision to go for 1.25 as opposed to 1 or 1.5? The incremental cost to tenants between 1.25 and 1.5 is fairly minor, at least on a weekly basis. So it'd be interesting to know how you arrived at that 1.25% figure, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before I answer that, can I just say a huge thank you to all the officers who have been performing an amazing service during these really difficult times, and also to welcome Terry and Gillian, who I thoroughly enjoy meeting at our tenants panel meetings, which I think is a real good relationship to forge. Obviously, being a responsible landlord, we have to have a viable business plan, and that plan was affected, as you know, for the 4 years of rent decreases, and last year was the first that we could get back the chance of recouping, and then the formula for this year was dictated as being CPI plus, it could be a maximum of 1% on top. In order to be able to carry on with our building programme, to replace the homes which are going to be lost through Right to Buy, to maintain the buildings, and to run the capital programme, it's imperative that we have a rise. And obviously we've got the increasing cost of the mortgage, which financed the purchase of the council properties. We considered all options. We looked at what if we do if it's no rise, but obviously the cumulative effect moving forward is going to be quite substantial. We did want to recognise that COVID has had an effect on people's finances. So rather than going for the maximum 1.5, and we are a coalition at the end of the day, so there was, you can guess there was a robust discussion about the amount involved. And we all came to with slightly different views, but at the end of the day, we think the whole programme is really worth supporting. So that's how we arrived at 1.25%. It was through discussion, but trying to reduce it below the maximum to save that little bit extra on the tenants. Thank you. Okay,
that's a very logical and thorough answer. Thank you very much. Good. I meant to stress at the start of the discussion that probably the people who we most want to hear from during this discussion are our tenants panel members, and I'm glad to see Terry's got up his hand. So please, Terry, the floor is yours, and do hold forth.
Thank you very much. Well, I think it's I go as a tenant. I can't sit here and say that we agree with any increase, and I suppose that's human nature. No tenant will be happy with an increase of whatever level. Many tenants have struggled over the last year to pay their current rate of rent, and any increase again will mean that there will be more people on that list of arrears. We've accepted that we've had to have a reduced maintenance program over the year. Things are taking longer, much longer. So, people will be looking at it that the service has not improved. The service has probably been very difficult for to accept, and but we do understand that there is a need to plan for the future. And although I make it it's no issue with Waverley over any of the repairs that have been delayed or whatever, we can quite clearly understand that, but it still will be of a great concern to all tenants, and particularly those that have financial difficulties at this time, and probably will do now for the rest of this coming financial year. So unwelcome, but I can understand why.
Right, thanks, Terry. Councillor Rosamond, do you want to come back on that?
Yes, thank you. Oh, I have unmuted, yeah. So I was hitting my buttons in a muddle here. I was just going to mention one thing I didn't say, which is obviously the contract for the maintenance will be reviewed. I think it's April. I think that's right, isn't it, Annalisa? Is it April? And their costs will be going up by CPI. So that's already going to take a chunk of the rise anyway. So I just thought it was important to mention that. Thank you.
Good. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone waving at me. So essentially, we're accepting that the proposal is not causing any great concern. It's any unmanageable concern amongst the members of the committee. So I think we can relay in our comments to the executive that we've discussed the proposed increase, that the portfolio holder has explained why it is what it is. We all accept that in the interests of having an ongoing programme, there has to be an increase, and therefore, since there's no objection, we're effectively supporting the recommendation. Okay, I'm not seeing any fists being raised, so that seems to be an acceptable summary. Right, the next item, probably less contentious, is the average weekly charge for garages rented by both council and non-council tenants be increased by 50p per week, excluding VAT, from the 1st of April. Does anyone wish to query that? No, seems pretty straightforward. Okay, so that the recommendation is accepted by the committee. The next item, 3, service charge for senior living accommodation be increased by 30p per week from the 1st of April to £19.80. Does anyone wish to comment on that? No, okay, it's a relatively small increase, and we have to cover our costs, so that seems reasonable. The item 4, the recharge for energy costs in senior living accommodation be increased by 50p per week from the 1st of April. No. Terry, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just ask, with energy charges, do Waverley get a specific rate, a special rate, or are we using any of these advertised agencies that reduce your bills every year?
We have a contract for our electricity and gas for senior living. So that's how we're in a sort of buying club. That's where we get the electricity from.
Thank you. And I take it that's reviewed on a regular basis, that you're getting the best offer. Thank you.
Good. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So the committee is supportive of that recommendation. Item 5, the revised housing revenue account business plan for 2021-22 to 24-25 as set out in Annex 1 be approved. So, yes, good. We're getting some questions now. Councillor Cole, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a question about the section which starts contribution to and from reserves. I think I understand most of it, but I don't understand the item line contingency and the one major repairs reserves, 2 from working balance, 2 from contingency. Can someone explain where is that money coming from? Since this section seems to be about money coming from reserves and stuff. So what are those lines, please?
Okay, so can you address that, please, Lindsay?
Yeah. So are you talking just about? You're not talking about the contingency line in the business plan. It's just the contribution to and from, is it?
Well, you can tell me what it is, but in that section, 2 from reserves, it's called contingency. If it's the same as the other contingency, then please tell me. But the number as stated is 2 million, which doesn't match up anything elsewhere.
Oh, all these figures tie up to the reserves annex. So if you look on Annex 4.
Okay, so there are a number of different lines which are termed as being reserves.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Last year we put in we wanted to build a reserve for the major repairs. So you can see that in there now. So that we have a reserve for the major repairs, but it's basically if you look at Annex 4.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Comfortable with that. Good. Okay. Councillor Marriott.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few technical questions on the commentary in the report. Not so much the financial implications, but what is written there in terms of some of the technical issues. The first one is the section 429 on page 18. It talks about a drive towards increasing energy efficiency and include programs to targeting further PV installations, slot installations, heating upgrades and so on. I question the PV installation issue. I'll just ask a question there. Do we have a properly or fully costed proposal for the benefits of going down the PV route? Because I'm not convinced they are cost effective. And I just wonder what has been done to see that as a good move. Why, for example, don't we have the solar water heaters on the roof? Because they're far more efficient and work all through the year. PV panels only work when the sun's out. So that's the first question.
So shall I answer that, Chair?
Yes, please do.
So I think we have the same concerns as Councillor Marriott, and again, sorry to put Councillor Marriott back to the agenda item on the asset management strategy. That's where we'll discuss that in more detail, where we should do a heavy investment in terms of energy efficiency. I think what we're just proposing next year is when we do a re-roof, if the roof can take PV panels, i.e. south-facing or near enough, we would put PV panels on those roofs as we're up there. But I think we're not totally convinced that putting PV panels on all our properties is something that we should be doing, especially as the government is saying the electrics, I forget what the target is, will all be from wind farms in any case. So we will be saving any carbon. So that's what we're only proposing for next year, but not to do a large program. And I think when we review the asset management strategy, that's when we begin to answer answer the kind of questions you've just raised.
Okay, thank you, Hugh.
Okay, so are you comfortable with that as a solution? I mean, it sounds reasonable to me, but do we want to note anything, or are you accepting that as an explanation?
Well, I think it's not a solution as such. I'd like to know more details on the costing that goes into those decisions.
Yeah, okay, but I think the response was that will be reviewed during the course of the asset management strategy, and they're not going to be throwing money at the problem, so probably shouldn't be too concerned.
Okay,
carry on.
Second question, it's the one below that one, item 430, and you talk about the fire risk assessment. I just wonder, post Grenfell, and I know there were problems there with the insulation material. And I just wondered who's responsible for giving you the guidelines that a certain insulation, or any material for that matter, has the appropriate fire approval. I mean, in the Grenfell case, was that the government or was it the manufacturer?
So, I mean, perhaps Louisa can talk about our new build, and I know she has done quite a bit of work in terms of when we've had materials on the cladding on the outside. I mean, in terms of our current properties, what we're actually going out to procure a new fire risk assessor, so who's qualified to actually do assessments for our properties. And I'm talking about the communal areas. I mean, I think it's less for us because we're not tower blocks. It's less for us, the materials. It's more fire breaks, and we've got the correct fire breaks. I'm talking about fire doors, blocks, breaks in the loft areas and things like that. So that's our real risk in terms of fire risk assessments in terms of our older property. I don't know if Louise has got any further comments on that.
Not really, other than we don't have any properties in our developments that have really been termed in the manner of cladding that is referred to in Grenfell. As you say, it's more about the fire breaks. We did have a development that was going through construction at the time of Grenfell, and obviously through CDM responsibilities, ensuring as a principal contractor, their duties to ensure that they can demonstrate the safety of the materials that they're using, and our employers agents obviously undertake the necessary checks together with the clerk of works for the project, ensuring that whatever's installed is installed appropriately. So it's the materials in our specification ensure that they cover the appropriate certification, and the checks are done, as I say, through our employer's agent and CDM requirements as well.
So Chair, just to confirm, so our risks of fire is clutter, rubbish in the communal areas, not correct fire breaks, not correct fire access, not correct fire doors, and that is where the programme is. We're going to, and that's why we've asked for extra staff, is not only doing that work, but actually having all the records. And I think that is another thing that we really need to, that we're expected to improve on, having, all the documentation around all these issues. Hopefully that answers the question.
Well, I think my major concern, I suppose, was because the same sort of material that was used in the cladding, the expanded polystyrene foam type materials, are used extensively, the same materials by the same manufacturer in loft insulation, for example. So the question is, there some sort of fire risk associated with that application?
I've not come across loft insulation. I don't know if Peter has, but I think it might be something we need to take away and come back to you. Peter, have you come across that?
Hello. Yes, there has been use of that in the past, but I think, as Hugh says, there's likely to be, through our fire risk assessment surveys that are currently taking place or just about to be tendered out, we will certainly be assessing any loft spaces, both for compartmentation and use of material, any of that old material, but generally that insulation may have been used on internal roofing, may have been, I think as we go through the programme, the FRA survey programme, we will be almost certainly identifying those risks and removing where necessary. Cladding issue, or sorry, the insulation issue, if you like, used behind Grenfell, behind those ACM aluminium cladding, was of that type that has been used before. But I think generally, given the archetypes of our properties, that's less likely to be the case in the roof space, in the roof backing off of the roof covering. So I feel that's less likely. But I think that as part of a considered programme, FRA programme, both the communals, but also as part of testing for insulation that is required in loft spaces to actually seal properties and make them heat efficient, energy efficient, we will be looking at that. And I think the asset management strategy certainly will have a whole section on how we deal with the regulations, compliance, and the new fire safety bill as is. So I think, yes, I don't like to commit to say that there's nothing in any of our roofs, but I think it's probably a minimal, a less of effect, than cladding on the outside of tower blocks.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much. Can I suggest, Councillor Marriott, that when we get on to the asset management strategy, you just raise that very briefly again, and we'll note that as a point of emphasis, just to make sure that our concerns have been addressed, because it's not so much a budget issue as a technical issue.
Okay, thank you.
You have another point?
Final one then, Chair, if I may. On section 6.5.1, the climate emergency, then you make a statement there that carbon offset opportunities in materials used in developing those opportunities. I just wonder what you mean by developing the opportunities.
What paragraph? Sorry.
6.5.1, where you say developing carbon offset opportunities in materials used. That's in connection with the new build contribution to the carbon neutral efforts.
Is that something Louisa could comment on?
Hugh, would you like me to respond?
Yes, please. Thank you.
This is in relation to the materials that we are looking to use for the construction of our new build properties, but also about the materials used in our landscaping, our hard landscaping, and considering the impact of those in our developments and ways that we can use green fencing, for example, rather than timber or other materials. That's what that's relating to.
Okay, it's not specifically related to the energy used in the house, and it's the.
No, it's the materials that are used to either in the construction or surrounding the properties themselves.
Well, actually, yeah, okay. The construction side is important, obviously. And again, the question would that be: how would you assess that that contribution?
We have undertaken a piece of work in relation to Site C, Otford Ridge, and actually worked with a landscape architect to try and measure the materials used in the hard landscaping proposals there, and how many years it takes to get to a net zero position, and their impact on the proposals and the development. So there is a means of assessing the carbon impact on materials.
Okay, thank you.
So is there anything out of those comments that you wish us to note, or have those been answered to your satisfaction?
Well, when we get on to the other section, maybe we'll see how that goes. Yeah, I mean, I think perhaps on that last comment, anything you might have, any report on the approach to the offset issue would be useful. Is that something you could send to me, or give me some information on that?
In relation to the landscaping?
Yes,
yeah.
Opportunity.
I'm happy to share our proposals for Otford Ridge Site C here.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Okay, thanks very much. I'm just going to take the liberty of having the floor to reinforce the comments Hugh made about the need for extra staff. It was made very clear at the conference in September that we had the informal meeting on just before Christmas that the Hackett report is going to introduce a lot of additional responsibility onto officers looking after council-owned housing, and Hugh mentioned the need for additional staff to manage compliance and retention of equipment, and retention of records right the way through the lifespan of council-owned properties. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to fully endorse the recommendation to hire additional staff. I think it's unreasonable to expect our senior managers to take the additional accountability that's going to be thrust upon them without having the supporting staff to carry out their duties. So I'll just like to put that on record. Right, I've got a couple more hands up. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Chairman. The HRR business plan is in effect linked, in my book, to the Annex 4, the housing revenue account reserves, because if you do the business plan, the result is you get the reserves that are set out on page 35. As a non-accountant, should I be alarmed that our reserves going down, opening reserves are going down in 2021 from 48,700 down to 24-25, 2.2 million from 48 million, or 3 million from 48 million. It seems to me that as a non-accountant, by the time we get to 24, 25, or perhaps 25 onwards, the money's run out. So is this something I should be worried about?
I can give an answer, but I'd probably like Graham Clark to assist me on this one. But I will say that
I'll say something initially, and perhaps Graham can come in. I mean, Basically, no, Councillor. I mean, the reason that they're coming down rapidly, not only are we building new homes, reinvesting in our stock, but we're paying off the loan substantially, and the amounts we're paying off each year go up quite dramatically. So if we are successful in our spend, when we get into year 24-25, we can review our loan at that time and decide, do we want to carry on reinvesting in our stock? Do we want to rebuild homes? And then we could consider borrowing extra money to do that. So that's the real reason, is that this is really coming down so rapidly, is that we're paying off that loan. I don't know if Graham wants to add anything to that.
Well, Chairman, so in addition to paying off the loan, the main reason the reserves are coming down is because the council is quite rightly spending it on current stock and new home provision, and that's all part of the original plan from when Waverley had to take this debt out, that backloading the principal repayments of the debt would enable surpluses to accrue in the early years so that we can get on and build new homes, which is exactly what Waverley is doing through Louisa's team. And so the main outflow from the reserves are the capital programmes that you see before you in the annexes, which are very substantial, and quite rightly so, because as many comments have come through earlier on in this discussion, reinvesting in the current stock and building new affordable homes for the next generation and the existing generation is exactly what the housing revenue account's all about, and that's where the money's going. And I think that's but from where I see this, that's a really positive step, that we're able to have a strong capital programme. And as Hugh said, I think when we get into sort of year 3-4 of this plan, if we're on track with our spending, then we will need to look at, in plenty of time, refinancing at that point. But at the moment, I don't see that there is a need to do that, because refinancing costs quite a lot of money. So we'll need to wait until that the optimal point before we start doing that. But I think this is a very strong business plan that shows that reinvestment of those surpluses and those reserves in a way that hopefully members and the tenants panel can see there's a huge amount of social value in. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so is that an adequate response?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I mean, yes, it just means, I'm all in favour of affordable housing and not storing money and ensuring we get more tenancies, but we have to recognise that when we get 24-25, we can't repay the loan and have more affordable houses. In fact, we can do neither with 2 or 3 million. We do have to then refinance the whole thing and raise money in order to carry on. So as long as we realise that's what we're doing.
Yes. Okay. No, I think that's completely clear. I've actually got myself a question written down, which is very, very similar to that. And I'll maybe say it in a slightly different word when we get onto the discussion of the capital programme. But we're on the business plan at the moment. Councillor Cole, you want to come back?
Thank you, John. I mean, as Councillor Marriott raised the Section 6.5 Climate Emergency Declaration, so I was going to step in on that. Overall, I couldn't see really any effect of the Climate Emergency Declaration on this budget in any of the tables. I mean, as I understand it, the council has, well, we do have ambitions to improve energy efficiency, et cetera, for the properties we have, but I couldn't see that appearing anywhere yet. I mean, and as this is a long-term programme, shouldn't that be in as a long-term ambition?
Chair, sorry, again, I think is that a discussion when we come to the asset management strategy, in terms of, because that feeds into the budgets going forward, and we can talk more about energy efficiency. I mean, the things like new windows and doors all contribute to improving energy efficiency. So there are things within the budget, not will help keep our homes warm. But I think whether we could hold on to that question and come back to it when we talked about the asset management strategy.
Can I also say at this point that we have actually got increased costs in Louisa's housing development. So projects have been recosted because of this.
Okay, well, if we're going to bring it back later, that's fine with me.
Okay, thanks very much. I mean, I totally agree, but I think it's possibly premature because there's such a potentially large range of costs out there for taking steps to modify existing stock and build our houses going forward, all which we will understand better in 6 to 9 months. So it's probably premature to make wild estimates. But yeah, we'll re-examine that again shortly. Still got Councillor Goodrich's hand up. Is that a legacy hand or another point? Okay, it's gone down. Good. Right, in which case I don't think we actually ended up, it was a good discussion and some interesting points. I don't think we actually raised anything that contradicts what's in the plan. There's some issues to be discussed largely in the asset management work, which will probably lead to a bigger discussion next year. But for now, I think we're probably in a position that we're prepared to support to the executive this committee's view on the proposed plan. Not seeing any heads nodding, or shaking rather. So okay, so we're in agreement on that one. Item 6 is the.
Can I interrupt?
Yes,
Sorry.
of course.
Just the one comment about the alternative, the water roof heaters. You know, the things you see on the continent. Could that be added into the list of potential improvements?
So
yes, and we'll pick this up on the next item.
But as part of the business plan.
Except, I mean, the business plan is fairly general, and the material in the report is a sort of general, a list of broad ideas. The detail will come in the asset management strategy, I think. So it's important we get it into that. But
if that report is not what's in there is not exclusive, then that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so you confirm that, Hugh. That's not exclusive, so that's okay. Good. But thanks for bringing that up. Right. So moving on, the next item is changes to fees and charges as set out in Annex 2. Does anyone wish to raise any comments about that? Doesn't appear to be particularly contentious. These items are always such that a small cost increase can be quite a large percentage increase, and vice versa. So you need to look at them very carefully. And I wasn't stressed by anything. I'm not seeing anyone else who was. So we're supporting that. Item 7. The recommendation is that housing revenue account capital programs as shown in Annex 3 be approved. So that's, are we supportive of that going to executive? And okay, I'm not seeing any hands up, but I guess I'd just like to restate Councillor Goodrich's point about the concern over the effect of the capital programs on our reserves. I think it's absolutely right that we, as Graham said, it's absolutely right that we're spending money that was put in the reserves in the first place to build houses. People can't live in reserves; they can live in property. So it's important that we get the properties built. I'm just a bit concerned that by 2024, we're not actually showing anything in the budget for building new houses. Still got 3 million for Section 106 purchases. But really the question here is, at what point are officers and the executive going to come to council with a proposal for refinancing the situation so that we can carry on with a capital programme going forward? Because at the rate of losing 15 houses a year through Right to Buy, we're going to end up in a situation whereas at the moment we're just about keeping our head above water and increasing the stock very slightly each year. By 2024, if we don't refinance or find some way of providing reserves to build more, we're going to be in a world of decreasing net stock. So as a general question, probably Graham or Andrew, at what point do we think we'll start considering a discussion about refinancing?
Chairman, I did put my hand up just on that point, if I may. And so I think there were two things. Firstly, the existing long-term loan structure, as I said earlier, it was very deliberately profiled in a certain way to enable reserves to be built up and then invested in new and existing stock. The other aspect of that is because that was part of a one-off government settling of the self-financing original debt, we were able to secure those loans at preferential rates. And they're still preferential rates compared to the current borrowing rates, even though interest rates generally are lower now than they were some 6-7 years ago. So to get out of those rates would cost a lot of money. So I think to answer your question about where we go next, I think we would start by looking at new borrowing for new schemes instead of restructuring existing borrowing. Now, clearly we'd take advice and we would compare the two and look at the options. My inkling is that if we're doing this in 2 or 3 years' time, it would be more financially beneficial to take on new borrowing through the Public Works Loan Board than it would be to restructure the existing debt, and we let that lie as it is because of the costs of breaking out of those fixed agreements, because they're all fixed interest, fixed term. So we get that certainty in the business plan. Now, the government have just revised the whole of the Public Works Loans Board, and some things now are not possible to borrow for, particularly if we're, as a council, chasing down a yield from a commercial investment. What is still allowable is borrowing for housing. And the government have now taken back down the borrowing rates to reflect those new restrictions. So in a couple of years' time, I suspect we'll be getting an options appraisal done on how to finance that new capital programme beyond this period. So, and we're certainly not going to wait until year 4 before we start looking at that. But I just don't think we need to do it now because there is enough money in the overall reserves package that Lindsay set out in that annex for us to have enough certainty for our investment for at least those 4 years.
Okay, no, thanks. Apologies, I was clumsy in my use of restructuring. I didn't actually mean restructuring our debt. I was thinking more in terms of restructuring the arrangement that we have for funding things going forward, and you've explained that very nicely. So,
well, Chairman, actually restructuring the debt is normally an option, to be honest, and we would be looking at that. But because of our initial preferential rate, it probably wouldn't be financially beneficial to do that. But it's absolutely something we would normally look at.
Okay, good. So I'm comfortable with that. I think it was the assurance that at some point, which is not now, there will be a hard look taken at arranging that the capital programme can continue at hopefully a similar sort of level or even better in the future. So that was on the basis of what Councillor Goodrich said earlier. Councillor Goodrich, do you want to say anything more about that, or is that a comfortable explanation? Okay, thank you.
Chair, can I just...
Yep, go ahead, Hugh.
Follow up on Graham. I think it's just to say that this is a very, we haven't really emphasised, it's a very ambitious budget. And as Councillor Cole has highlighted, this is a budget we've assumed is business as usual, even though we've still got COVID. So I think we've got quite a challenging year in terms of income collection and actually spending the money. And I think so I think, again, we need to see if we can how we get through this next financial year. And if we are successful spending the money, that's fantastic. But I think we really need to get through the coming year and to deliver all the programs that we put forward to members today.
Okay, thank you. Can I go to the tenants panel members and just see if they have any views on this? At the end of the day, you know, we're much of the capital, or all of the capital program is for the benefit of the tenants. Does it seem suitably ambitious? Does it lack ambition? Are we trying too much? Terry, do you have a view on that?
Yes, I think, I mean, it's heartening really to see that people are looking at in 5 and 10 years time and to see what's going to happen. I think I'd be more concerned as a tenant if you didn't know what you were going to do in the year 22, 23. So yes, it's interesting to read as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Right, I'm just going to look around to see if all the members of the committee are broadly supportive of this plan. Then I think we've had explanations as to why it, you know, why it is the way it is. Hugh's told us that it's going to be a lot of challenge and uncertainty, and that's fine. And I think we have to live with that. I think it's the general direction of travel that we need to be important, to be comfortable with. So is everyone comfortable with the general direction of travel? I'm looking around for nodding heads. Yeah. Okay. So we're supportive of that item. Okay. And the final area where we're asked to endorse a recommendation is the financing of the capital programme in line with the resources shown in Annex 4. Are there any questions on that? Or is this where the financing gets too complicated? No. Okay. So I think right. So the committee then is supporting the recommendations as set out. I just ask one other question before we move on. Our colleagues in Value for Money have raised quite a few concerns about the way budgetary material has been set out for the general fund. It's not done the same in quite the same way for housing, and I found it reasonably straightforward to follow. But there is a request out there for the finance team to take a look at the way budgets have been, the way that budgets will be presented next year. So now is just an opportunity to say, for members of the committee to say if you were stressed by the presentation, or to express their gratitude to Lindsay for making it all pretty clear. I certainly wasn't too taxed by what I had in front of me, but I have a bit of a background in accounting, not much, but others who don't might find it harder. Does anyone want to say anything on that, or are we comfortable to get the material in the same format next year? Good. Well, there we go. Silence is golden. Well done, Lindsay.
Thank you very much. I can easily do more pre-committee training, budget training, if anyone is interested, so I can do that.
Okay, that's a really good offer, and I'll ask members of the committee to bear that in mind and ask in plenty of time next year, when hopefully we'll be back in the classroom rather than doomed to Zoom. Good. Okay, so that concludes the budget. Thank you very much to the officers that have joined us for that, and well done for preparing a clear and defensible offering for us. So. Good. Right. So the next item is the asset management strategy. If we've got the energy to continue, I'm going to invite. Well, I was going to invite Hugh, but Hugh's been talking about Peter. Who I don't think has Peter been introduced to us yet. That might be a good starting point.
Yes. Hello. Good evening. Yeah, I'm the interim asset manager, appointed back in only 2 months now. My name is Peter David. I have a background in asset management specifically over the last 20 odd years, various authorities throughout London and the surrounds. And I'm actually local. I live on the edge of Godalming, Waverley is quite close to my heart, and Godalming is quite close to my heart. So yes, I'd I think Hugh will probably chip in at some point, but I'd like to just kind of give a background to this, the report that I think the members of ONS have seen and had provided before this meeting. This kind of conversation is in two parts. One, to just kind of give some background to the paper, and to secondly discuss and have a sort of a mini discussion around the presentation and some of the competing priorities that as we go forward in the development of the asset management strategy will need to be consulted on with all the stakeholders, particularly the Oversight and Scrutiny Committee, as well as the Executive Board and such like as we go through. So I'll come to that in a moment, but I'm happy to take questions through the paper or at the end. The report sets out essentially where we started from. My predecessor started some work on the development of a new asset management strategy, the housing asset management strategy. Back in 2018, I think there was a paper to this committee, and this builds off of that, and there has been work during that time, but this is really now a report that sets out the new strategy and how we're going to develop it. For anybody who doesn't know, we had an asset management strategy. We have an asset management strategy currently at 2015 to 2020. Asset management strategies, documents that generally set out the aspirations of how we are going to meet housing, the needs of the housing stock and the aspirations of the residents, and ensuring best value and best use of resources in delivering meeting the needs of our residents and assets. The new strategy, which will need time to be consulted on and developed with all the various stakeholders, is going to take place through this next coming financial year, ready for a new asset management strategy, 5-year. A 5-year strategy is generally how asset management strategies are written, and that will be a 2022 to 27 asset management strategy. So I'd kind of just like to pick up on a few items in the report. Clearly, there are key priorities that an asset management strategy should always have in mind, and some of those are the basic standard ones that we see every time we produce one over the last 20 years: the investment profile, the investment over 5-year periods, divided up over the 30 years of a plan. But in thinking about all these things and how we invest in energy, how we invest in the components of our buildings, we've got new considerations and new priorities and far more kind of value being placed on and importance being placed on both our commitment to energy, and I know this report picks up on quite a lot around our commitment to the climate, the energy efficiency, energy and climate agenda emergency, and also picks up as well on our need to meet compliance and regulatory kind of concerns. So I kind of looking at through the report, you'll see reference to some of the standard parts of an asset management strategy. They are highlighted in Annex 2 of this report, I believe, Annex 2, and they actually will be areas which we will go through as we develop the asset management strategy through next year. There is in this report a part of this report that sets out a provisional timetable through next year, through the development, through the appointment of support in terms of consultancy, both as a critical friend and from a benchmarking perspective. And it sets out all the kind of key milestones involving drafts and consultation with the various stakeholders, focus groups and workshops. So there is a timetable embedded in this. More detail will follow on that timetable and what the constituent detailed parts of it are. But I'd just like to draw that inside of this, we've made quite a lot of reference to that climate change agenda, and that at the heart of this asset management strategy, that will be a key part of it, as well as our compliance, meeting our compliance. And it's already been mentioned, I think, by members during this meeting about the importance of those areas. And just to give some assurance to how we're going to develop that energy plan, at this point, it has to be said, we don't actually have all the answers to that plan. So we will be working closely with energy experts to develop and strategic experts to develop a plan, especially as a lot of the technology that will get us to net zero carbon, our net zero carbon target, a lot of that technology hasn't actually been designed as yet. So there are things to consider in terms of that plan, options around retrofit of our existing stock, new build, and other things that will help us get to that target around technology. But those have all got to be designed and developed out of the asset management strategy in terms of an energy, almost a plan to achieve a carbon neutral status. So more detail will follow on that. I just want to draw you to the only other area that I think really we have other parts of this strategy that are probably covered in the annex, but the one other area is the tenants and the tenants panel. Meeting our aspirations, the aspirations of our tenants is a key part of this. So whilst we've invested a lot in our in the major elements of buildings, we do have to put quite a bit of effort into considering how we will consider the environmental, the landscape, the curbside appeal, those things that are the softer areas of investment. And when we come to the presentation, which will follow shortly, I'll kind of talk through some of that. So I'm happy to take some questions around the report. The only other part of the report is the annex that sets out our interim plan through this year. Aside from developing the asset management strategy, we still have some key areas of consideration. And I know one of the members just talked about analysis of repairs as a proactive measure. Obviously, as part of an investment, any investment plan, we look at reducing our responsive repair liability and pushing it onto our planned program, our planned programs. So there are quite a few different areas mentioned in the appendix around works and areas of work that will happen this year, and that will dovetail into the asset management strategy as well, but they are just almost discrete bits of work in themselves. So happy to take some questions on that if anybody would like to talk about them, but they're linked to budgets, they're linked to reviews, and they're linked to pieces of work that have been identified in the past. So we can talk about that. Maybe if we come on to the presentation, Kimberly.
I wonder, Chair, Peter's covered quite a bit in his presentation. There was quite a lot of questions already, because the idea of the presentation was to get discussion going, but I wonder if there was enough questions
probably
already waiting, whether we need any further presentation, Chair.
Okay, so I can't actually, I can't, while we've got the slides up, I can't actually see everyone's faces. Oh, there we go. Okay, so there's no one waving at me and there are no hands up. So I think we might need a quick presentation to stimulate the comments. I have got some questions, but I'll keep them. Let's go ahead, Peter. That was good so far. Thank you.
Okay. Kimberly, could we possibly have the presentation up? Otherwise, thank you. Okay, so as I've said, this is the development of a 5-year asset management strategy. To be clear, that is the standard. You will see that in many organisations, and whilst I understand that some people will be familiar with this an asset management strategy, a housing asset management strategy, as we go forward, I think we're going to see it as less of a document that just sits on a shelf, and more of a document that's actually an organic pathway route map to how the organisation invests in its housing, and that includes the standard investment alongside compliance, alongside energy. So, second slide, please. As I've said already, crucial in setting direction and discussion. The consultation that I talked about is referred to in the matrix provisional timetable in the paper. There will be an awful lot of consultation that will need to take place over the duration of the development, and that will take place with amongst other people, the stakeholders, the tenants panel, members of this committee and staff. So this is not a document that will just remain in the reside of the asset management team or just the experts. This will be a document that people will contribute to and will understand, hopefully. Just to give a bit of a feel for it, it's quite a weighty document, but there will be a kind of executive summary that makes it a short version that makes it a lot easier and palatable for members to read. But the depth, like the budget, is in the background. You can go into an awful lot of depth, and that will be there too. Next slide, please. So the high-level considerations we have at the top, achieving net carbon measures. And these are versus other investment priorities. Now, we'll come on to the slide in a minute, but and I may repeat myself, but that achieving net zero is going to be not just a big target, but a huge challenge for us to ensure how we achieve it, what technology we use, how we can actually contract and procure. All of those things to achieve that are going to be challenges, but clearly we still have to invest in our we have other investment priorities, and I've talked about some of those in terms of the softer investment, but also investment in the major infrastructure stroke the envelope of the building stroke the curtilage. So that's a consideration we'll be coming to. Tenants' aspirations I've talked about versus tenants' needs. So we can kind of understand that by sometimes people have aspirations that really are maybe higher than what we really need to do, but we have to consider that, and those things will play off against each other. There are the more technical aspects of this, which I just want to bring to this forum, are around investment standards and investment approaches. So that will just give you a flavour of what in the background has to still be considered. And then obviously we've got the link with the business plan. And I think I understand everybody's, when everybody sees the big figure of the core programme or the lack of detail behind an energy action plan, as yet, some of that isn't in place. But as we develop the asset management strategy, some of those quite a lot of those costs will fall into place, and so capital programs will fall out of the asset management strategy. So I'll come on to the individual slides. Next slide, please. This is just to give a flavour. I think it was asked by the chair, possibly, but just to give an idea of what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with quite a large amount of investment required if we go per property to all of our properties. And these are just some examples from some pieces of study that have been carried out elsewhere. Energy Sprong is a wraparound technology. You might have heard it in terms of Passive House, but it's a wraparound technology that essentially envelopes the building and gives you the required carbon reduction. But as you can see, a very high per property figure. I haven't written on this slide, but that is a competing priority. We will always face, as we go forward, the need to procure services, expert services to deliver this. And so will we be competing against quite a few other authorities and other housing associations who also are trying to achieve carbon neutral, maybe not so quickly as us, but they will be certainly in that same arena. So that this is a consideration in terms of a major consideration in terms of our investment. So something to get everybody's head round. Next slide, please, Kimberly. So here I've given some examples of the kind of ideas that we will have to consider and actually consult on. Wider home improvements. Hugh and I have talked about this at length in terms of standard, not just kitchens and bathrooms, but other areas of the house, living rooms. And, you know, we live in a COVID world now. Will Zoom, will living, you know, requirement for rooms to work in, will that become a new way of looking at our investing in our stock? That's just a current area, but kitchens and bathrooms have long been our staple diet. As we move forward, they may put less of a focus on that because we've covered off a lot of that under decent homes. Wider estate works. I think I've seen this mentioned many places about the softer side, the landscaping, the bin stores, the actual external parts, the curtilage of the block versus the actual external block itself. So, you know, where people live, that's very important to us and to them. And we can all understand why, you know, living in a nice area is as important as living in a warm and comfortable house, a home. So that's a consideration and a competing priority. And the other area that I've tagged onto this, because in the short time I've been at Waverley, I've worked quite a lot with the community development officers around parking, paths and curtilage works. And just talking about parking, I mean, in the future, even as part of our energy commitment, we're going to have to think more about electric cars and electric charging points and where they are, and have people got the necessary parking. It's not going to be parking on grass verges necessarily, but that is currently in certain places what happens. So we will have to consider that. Curtilage works is, you know, a area that covers all those probably people think quite dull things like hard standing and boundary walls, but all of those are important considerations to investment. Next slide, please. I'll whiz through these. Anybody can ask me these. We can have a training day on these two next slides, but we've clearly had investment in decent homes over the last 10, 15, 20 years. Hugh and I again talk regularly about a new modern home standard, and we touched upon it in the last slide. That's something that may be coming. And the third point down about future decent homes plus standard, that's in the government's already being considered by the government. It hasn't been released out, but obviously that's something that could come. We've been, I think decent homes is quite often referred to as a minimum statutory standard. There may well be some future development there. At the moment, we've also got our design criteria for lifetime home standard versus flexible tenancies approach. So what we mean by that is, are we going down the route where we're looking at the long term from cradle to grave kind of idea, or are we developing a more flexible approach to how we invest over in line with our flexible tenancies approach? So that obviously governs how you invest in your homes, and the level of investment you need to put in over the period of 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Those are investment type standards. We also have the new build standard, which Louisa could talk about, but that does exist, and we have our design approach for that. So that's also there. Next slide, please. This is just more about general investment approaches, and you might like to consider the idea, if you haven't already, if you're not aware of this, that at the basic level, we have to consider day by day a repair kind of investment approach versus a replacement. So what we mean by that is, do we need to replace, renew as a whole? A good example of this is a roof. Do we replace roofs that have, are not at the end of their life? They can be repaired to a lesser extent. Do we limit that along and increase our the amount we have to invest in our stock? There are a lot of pros and cons for both, but it clearly those two approaches can work together. And they can elongate your investment profile, so you can spend more money over a longer period, or spend as much money over a longer period. Some other types of approaches are a holistic block approach. Quite often people talk about arriving at a block and doing all the works in one go and then moving on, so that you don't have to have a situation where you need to go back to the residents in a block, in a street, in a house. That's quite an expensive front-end approach, but it is an approach still. And then there's just what is known as just-in-time works, which is, as it says, literally doing it just before a renewal is up. Yeah, so that's a more straightforward approach, but some authorities adopt that type of approach, which is they arrive at every block or every element just as it is about to fail and put it right. Sometimes hard to justify that because it doesn't seamlessly fit with all your other priorities. It's a little bit piecemeal. Final slide, I think, is probably coming up. Thank you very much. And this just ties in with the business plan. Anything to do with the asset management strategy has clear connections and links with the HRA business plan, and will almost inevitably feed into it in some way. But the considerations here, you've probably already seen through Lindsay's slides, but the level of reserves, the impact of CPI increasing from 24, 25 onwards, and the importance of rent setting within the plan. They're all key considerations that will potentially allow you to invest over the period of 30 years. And bear in mind, although the strategy is 5 years, the actual investment profile is over a 30-year period. So clearly all these things that are mentioned in the business plan link quite closely in the HRA business plan and the asset management strategy. I think that could be the last slide. My voice is a bit hoarse. I'm happy now to take any questions and I'll give any answers as well.
Right, thank you very much. That was really, I found it really clear and comprehensive, and very, very stimulating and challenging. So good. I'm starting to see hands go up. So Councillor Cole, please.
Thank you, Chairman. obviously it's not time now to debate all the pros and cons of various green technologies. So I welcome the timescale program, which is in section 413, the table of steps to be taken to get through to develop this and to get people's input. And I look forward to going to those meetings on that subject. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Baker.
Thank you. Yes, I found that very stimulating, actually. So thank you very much. There are questions that certainly got my dander up, decisions to be made. I thought some very undesirable things, and I think you highlighted just-in-time works, which seemed to me in principle not to be a good idea. But anyway, I think really it was just stimulating, and I don't want to go into detail, but I think the sooner we can get on with this, the better, because we do want our housing to respond to the needs of the planet and the needs of the tenants. And also, it's just a horrible matter, as always, of available resources. So there's an awful lot to balance out there. So thank you very much. I'm not going to comment on anything specific.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Keane's finger up, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you very much. Very good presentation. One of the things that I just wanted to ask Peter was, when you were talking about parking and curtilage, are you talking about new build areas, or are you talking about parking in general? Because on many of our estates now, parking is at a total maximum. When you talk about parking on the grass verges, that's exactly what everybody has to do. Otherwise, the emergency services can't get through. And I've known the dust cart people to actually be knocking on doors, asking people to move their cars so that they can get the dust cart through. So just wanted to ask that, because obviously that's something that's an ongoing situation that's only going to get worse as children grow up and have another car. So you very often now find that there are 3 or 4 cars to one family on an estate, and you can imagine if every household had at least 2, it's a nightmare. Just wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on that, please. Thank you.
Yes, well, yes, it's mentioned there, and I know that it could be controversial, but I know from speaking to, as I said, the community development officers who have quite a close link with residents, that it is an issue, and the asset management strategy is going to have to answer a lot of these competing issues, and parking shouldn't be off the agenda. Partly, I mentioned about energy and electric cars, that will happen as well, but partly about that issue around green spaces being parked on. And I think, just to give you some assurance, it's bringing it back on the agenda because of these issues. I've heard it mentioned at the tenants panel, and it's a competing one with green land, and I understand that. But the asset management strategy, and I don't mean to use it as just a big word, it's a kind of a jigsaw. We're going to have to find a really good fit for all of our kind of priorities, if you like, and some might be a bit lesser, but they've got to somehow find a place to sit aside something else. And I think with the parking issue, working with the community development officers, we're going to look over the next year, and so that we get to a point where we're not just patch repairing parking spaces, or we're looking at possibilities of infrastructure where we can. I know that there's been work on that carried out with Surrey County Council, but we may well have to revisit it. And I think clearly we cannot avoid, we have to find solutions to the problems you're talking about. For instance, multi-car usage, however that comes, we're going to have to find that solution. Yeah. Otherwise, it just builds the problem. So just like with a lot of these priorities, which need thinking about, roofs replacing, repairing, renewal, they're all going to have solutions put to them. And I did say, of course, one of the biggest ones we haven't even necessarily got the technology for as yet, the energy climate agenda, but we will have to find solutions. And I think just on the parking issue, it may be small fry to some people, but it has a lot of voices out there that I hear. And so we will be working up some interim solutions around that. At least some work will go in so we can build on that when we get to the asset management strategy. I hope that answers some part of it.
Yeah, the smiling face. I think you got there. Yeah, that's good. Councillor Marriott.
Thank you, Chair. No, I thought that was a very interesting presentation, Peter. I like some of the issues you raised, and particularly sort of the choice between replace and repair. And that's sort of smacks of the things that I'm very keen on establishing. That's whole life costs, which you have to consider in any of these issues and things you do to the buildings. And that respecting the PV panel problems I mentioned earlier, the solar heaters, the water and so on, should all be looked at from the whole life cost consideration and how much you're gaining from them. You know, that's the measure of their effectiveness has to be part of that equation. I'd be very happy to feed my sort of experience into your deliberations on things like the PV panels which we have in the house. I can tell you we don't use them. We don't use the electricity anywhere near as much as people might think, because it's usually in the summer, and we don't have the lights on in the summer. So that's my own view, but we can talk more about that offline. Also, electric car charging. I've got experience of that, which I can feed in. Now, the thing I'd like to really make a focus on is this. The statement on net carbon zero measures. Well, I think that's a misnomer. Certainly from the electric or the power usage in a house, we are already receiving net zero energy from the power companies, so they claim. And even if we didn't believe them, what would we do? We'd have to plant trees somewhere. It's not really a practical approach. So I think we go along with the power companies and assume, or at least make sure if we can, that they are good to their word. So strictly speaking, we are only really interested in the house usage from energy efficiency. And that's the only measure we can really establish we can achieve something. We can't establish what we mean by net zero.
Yes.
Carbon. There's no measure. We can't justify it.
So just to come back on that, I totally agree with that. I welcome the conversation that we could have offline and in future consultations. But just to give you some reassurance, I understand that variable that you're talking about. And we do, even with inside our homes, have a energy efficiency rating, as you probably are aware. And it used to be a bit more finite than it is now with the EPC. But moving forward, I hope to set that what we can do is get a handle on our, and just to give you an example of this, you can have a rating based on a few elements of the house or multiple elements, 100 elements of the house. We're looking to improve our data, and I didn't talk about data, but the report talks about data, improving our data and improving our information so that we can make that we can assess where we actually have to invest our money in terms of energy efficiency of the home. And I am happy to share that when we get to that. I'm doing a bit of a data audit on our energy with the hope that we can actually say, we can put much more into reducing the energy efficiency usage, fuel poverty inside our homes. That's a key area that we need to focus on. And moving our stock up through rating levels up to the higher levels, C and B, are where we really need to get to in the interim measure. So yeah, I welcome your comments, and I think there's going to be a lot of discussion around that energy supplier I myself have an electric car, and I can tell you lots of stories about it and what it does for me. But I think, yes, I welcome that conversation, and I totally understand your view on that. Yeah, and respect it.
I'd be pleased to get involved in that.
Good. I'll make a note.
Chair, does that cover the comment you made earlier about bringing this subject up at this agenda item, so it goes on the?
Well, so I think your critical item was the making sure that the insulation was
that was one item, yes,
properly looked at. Yeah.
And then the discussion about the PV panels. It's just one of those items on that list.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what I have to say is, from what I've heard and what I've seen, the people who are carrying this out totally get the complexity of it, and I could have come away from this either feeling totally horrified or with a slight warm fuzzy feeling that we've got someone on the case who gets what's required, and I'm in the latter place, which is great. What I would like to ask is, are we comfortable that we have adequate resource to deliver this on the timescale required? Because it is a big complex jigsaw to assemble.
I would just like to hopefully reassure you. I mean, that's why we've bought some time in terms of the timeline to deliver it for next year. Not this financial year, but the following financial year. So we've got a little bit of fat there and a little bit of room for manoeuvre. But we also absolutely, I think we've set it out that we need consultancy help on this, because it isn't just the consultations that we need, the understanding, the wider understanding of the experience of people who are energy specialists to feed into our plan to hit our targets, or start to hit our targets, or understand our targets and understand our procurement with it. But I think, if I'm honest, it might be an expanding area, but at the moment I'm comfortable that with my own team, myself, and expertise in the area of building an asset management strategy and a modern asset management strategy, examples of consultancies that focus only on asset management strategies, and I've already spoken to at least 3 of them who are happy to tender and have explained that they are doing work with authorities around us. So a bit further, Southampton and such like, where they're working specifically on areas of energy and sustainability, and that energy action plan that is needed. So I'm reasonably comfortable. We never know where the world's going to change, but I think we've got a timeline, and clearly the consultation is going to be a big part of that. Usually that's it's not as big a part, but I think in Waverley, my feeling is everybody will want a word in this, and that's fine. We can give them that time, because really we need to absorb that to be able to understand the direction of travel. So I'm comfortable about it at the moment, and I think we hope to feed back that timetable in more detail, and if that expands a little bit, then that is how it is. But I feel we've got enough time. A year to deliver an asset management strategy should be enough. These strategies generally get delivered in a 3-month period, which is why they end up a little bit on the shelf. We need to take a bit more time, but I'm comfortable with that.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Given how important this is, could I ask Hugh if it's going to be okay that we get a quick verbal update at each successive meeting? So we obviously don't want to be taking up the time of officers who should be doing valuable other things, but just in the way that Michael Rivers is coming and giving us a quick verbal update, it would be nice to feel that everything's on track and that we're aligned with where it's going. So can we ask for this to become a standing item at the at future meetings? That would be excellent. The other thing that seems hugely important to me out of this is that we've set a target for carbon neutrality in the council of 2030, and the contribution of our council-owned stock is the lion's share of CO2 emissions, and it would be good to know sooner rather than later about the viability of getting to that point or not, because it's not the cost you put in front of us was enormous, and I don't honestly believe that we're going to have to go down that route to get to where we need to be. But the rate of putting things right is absolutely phenomenal. It's basically 2 houses every working day until the end of the plan. So it depends what you're going to do, but it's hard to envisage putting 2 houses right every working day, whatever you're going to do. So, I think we're going to need a reality check as soon as it can be made available. Just a high level one, just to, possibly lead to a recalibration of thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be good. Okay, I've got no other hands up. So I think we've fed back. We're just feeding back to officers on this, so I'm comfortable with feeding back on the asset management plan. In terms of the interim plan, I'm just a little bit concerned that what you've put in front of us is like several recent plans that councillors have been asked to approve, and it's not actually a plan but a list of items to be addressed. So I'm very comfortable with the list of items, but I'd feel a lot happier if we could actually get a few costs and durations to this, and it doesn't have to be hugely complex. I'm just thinking in terms of a 1-page Gantt chart with a number of full-time equivalent inputs to each item to make sure that we're not requiring more staff to deliver it than we've actually got, and a cost of external costs above manpower. So if that could be produced just to tidy up the plan so it is a plan rather than a list, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. Do colleagues think that's a reasonable request? Yep, good. In which case we're in good shape. And I'd really like to congratulate Hugh and Peter for the clarity of that piece of work and setting us with a feeling that this is going to be a very positive outcome over the next year. Thank you. Good. Right. Should we soldier on quickly? And I apologise, we've overrun, but last night they went on till 9:30. If we can beat that, we'll take some credit. Agenda item 10 should be reasonably straightforward. Hugh, are you going to introduce that?
Yes, Chair, I'm not going to say too much. I mean, Heather's report is very clear. Basically, we're on target. So if we go to page 53, it's just to say the huge amount of work that Heather did, bringing all that consultation that we did, including the work of this committee, bringing that all into the contract documents and getting that all together, was a huge amount of work. So everything, that people have said, we tried to capture in the documents, and it was all bundled up, and we were able to publish in line with the target of January 2021. So it has been published, and at the moment we've had 73 registered interests registered. So hopefully they're not all going to progress, because there's going to be a huge amount of work shortlisting those. But yes, so there's looks like quite a bit of work to continue with. But basically the message is we're on target.
Good. Any questions about that? No. Good. So there are a lot of to be confirmed set against the future timings on that, Hugh. Is there any risk, or is that just a sort of general acceptance that COVID could shift things a couple of weeks here and there?
I think that Heather saying we haven't met that yet, and when we come to that, it's just confirmed. So this is the rather than saying target date, she's just been to be confirmed. So I think these are target dates. So I don't think there's any risk at the moment.
Okay, that's excellent. Good. Well, congratulations to Heather for getting us to where and the rest of the team for getting us to where we're going. Sounds good. Very professional. Thank you. Right. Just the last item, the committee work programme. So I'm going to hand over to Louise Norrie to lead through this. We've got Mark Mills, our new scrutiny officer, with us, but we're all agreed that it's probably rather too daunting to give someone new to the committee the task of trying to lead us through stuff we know and he hasn't yet experienced. So he'll take over the reins at the next next round of meetings. But Louise, would you like to lead us through?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'll keep it brief given the time. So on the forward programme, which starts on page 59 of your agenda, we've got section A, which there's nothing to update on or report on that, but on section B, as we've just had the asset management strategy, I think you'll want a sort of progress report on that at some stage later in the year, a verbal update, as I think you mentioned. We've got the RCT as a standing item, so we'll be having that back. I think in conversation with you earlier, the housing, the voids contract will need to come back to us sort of summertime, sort of halfway through up until next year. So we'll have that back. The corporate performance report is a standing item, and we'll have the next one in March. The housing development update, again, we didn't have that, unfortunately, this time because we have a full agenda, but we'll have that from Louisa next time in March. Service plans, yep, they missed this this cycle as well, but we will have those in full in March as well. The affordable housing SPD has gone round to members, and I think you've all had a chance to comment on that, so that will be taken off the agenda. Housing strategy, very important item, that will be coming back or coming to us in March, hopefully. So the other items are to be confirmed. The other items that were added, Chairman, you attended the Value for Money meeting last night, and there was a corporate complaints report across all the different services. And there was an interesting item on the lessons learnt on complaints coming to housing. So you have asked for that to come back to this committee just to see how those lessons learnt were implemented. So we'll have that either next time or the one after.
Is everyone comfortable with that? It's just, you know, lessons learned are fine, but actually the actions that arise from those lessons learned are the key things that make everything better. So it was a good report last night, very much offered in the spirit of continuous improvement. And my request was just to make sure that that continuous improvement is cemented. So if everyone's comfortable with that, we'll add that in. Just a very brief piece of assurance. Yeah. No.
Chairman, sorry, on section 3, as you know, as members will know, that the Housing Design Standards Task and Finish Group has started working. So we'll have an update on that, but at this time, no other working groups will be commencing, but and there's nothing at the moment to add to that list. Thank you.
Excellent. Is everyone comfortable with that, or are there things that we've omitted that we should have added in? Okay, I've got Councillor Baker. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out that we are concerned about mental health and because of it has now gone right up as a high profile issue because of the pandemic. I don't want to see this sidelined on the Housing Scrutiny Committee. I think actually considering the welfare of tenants in the light of the problems that are such a feature of life at the moment means that we should actually be maybe hoiking that up the agenda. I don't want to see it drop off the table, and it seems rather low down on the list here. But can I put in a plea for that to be considered with more focus? Thank you.
So can I get Andrew Smith to reappear and possibly give some comment on that? I mean, totally agree with the importance. There are actually two issues here. One is all the mental health issues that are being created by the current lockdown situation, which is not why we put this on the original list, but it is an issue. So there's a question of can officers shed any light on that for us, or is that actually more a community well-being issue? I suspect it might be. the other issue is the one we were more concerned about is how are we actually managing the supply of housing for our residents with mental health issues in the community. And yeah, okay, so you're agreeing with that. The challenge is, and it's been pointed out regularly to us each time we bring this up, that this is an extremely complex issue. And I suppose the question is, have we got the resource to invest in that, given all the other things that are urgent at the moment? So it's absolutely not dropping off the agenda. It's a question of can that particular aspect be best solved when we're back to a situation where we have a little more headroom for the officers. I'd like the officers to comment on that. I'm not trying to defend the position, just to share my understanding.
Chair, I'm afraid Andrew got called away on emergency, so I'm afraid probably still away from his desk. So apologies for that. I mean, we do have on the work plan for him and Laura Dillon, who manages the housing officers, to come and do a presentation on how we manage tenants who may be suffering from mental health issues. And that may be a start of the discussion, because we have, as Councillor Baker said, we have been talking about this for a while, and that presentation might bring out what more this committee can do. Because I think mental health generally is not this committee, and it's around relative to tenants and potential tenants. But I don't know. So I don't know whether Louise can find room for that presentation, just to get that debate going, because as the councillor said, she has said has raised this a few times.
Okay, we've got a few more hands up, so let's just hear what other councillors want to say on this particular item. Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. I do agree with Councillor Baker. I think it is a very serious issue, but my personal view is that I don't think we are going to find out just how serious mental health issues are until we start coming out of COVID. And I think then is the time that we are going to see a huge amount of problems. And I probably agree with you, it's probably something, the mental health issue is something that should be with well-being to a degree. But I think we are going to see a lot more problems come post-COVID. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chairman. I wasn't actually going to speak to the mental health issue. So if other members would like to speak to that first, I'd like to come back later on a different matter. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got several hands up here, all officers, in fact. Annie, would you like to say something on this?
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to say, it sounds like a very good idea to have Laura talk about how we manage tenants with mental health issues. But the whole subject of mental health, I think if you're going to look at it, you need to focus on what the outcome will be and what we can do to make a difference. Because you're right in saying it could take an awful lot of officer resource, and we need to understand what difference it'll make. How will it help the community? And it may be that we need to have better leaflets or awareness or something like that, or we may need to link with the CAB differently. So I think it's those kind of really practical things that I would urge you to focus on, because mental health in itself is a massive topic. And you're right, until we come out of the end of that, we probably won't, at the end of this sort of current lockdown, I think you'll see just the scale of it, and particularly in younger people who are not going to school at the moment. So I'd urge you just to focus on it's the so what factor. So what are we going to do? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. Councillor Rosamond.
Thank you, Chair. My signal's a bit iffy, so I've turned off the camera. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, go ahead.
Hugh and I discussed this with the tenants at the tenants panel recently, because there was some concern, especially in senior living, about isolation and tenants being affected. And we did talk about discussing the ability to run a pilot whereby Wi-Fi could be rolled out to one scheme, so that we could maybe engage with our tenants, getting a little bit more computer savvy and being able to talk to their families online, etc. So it's not something that doesn't come up regularly. And I actually mentioned this at the Community Wellbeing ONS last week. So it is on the agenda. And one thing the tenants panel are great at doing is feeding that information into us. So I do thank them for that. So I just thought I'd let you know. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. That's really helpful. Mark, do you want to say something?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Just to say, as was just mentioned, Community Wellbeing ONS is currently looking at mental health and in particular suicide prevention, and they've resolved to basically look at Surrey County Council currently has a suicide prevention strategy and looking at how that can be kind of localized and applied to specifically to Waverley. And I think one of the kind of things that will be quite high up on that is making sure that housing officers who deal with members of the public are able to offer kind of mental health first aid and signpost them to resources, because obviously people at threat of eviction, that's a very acute source of stress. So that's kind of one of the areas the counties, the Public Health Authority, clearly wanted us to play a part in on mental health.
Good. Okay. So we're always welcome to pitch up at other overview and scrutiny meetings. I've spoken at both environment and value for money in the last couple of months. And, if the mental health issues are of concern, particularly the ones arising from COVID, which is more community well-being, then do invite yourself along. Just put your name down, and I'm sure the chairs will be perfectly welcoming for input to be made at those. In terms of the conversation we've had, I think it might be good if we put that to be confirmed for mental health down as an item for the summer meeting, and then we can discuss that with officers and see if we can tease out something that is going to lead to, they're going to give us some meat to get into that this committee can worry about in relation to mental health, mental well-being and housing, rather than just general mental health. Okay, we're comfortable with that. Right, Councillor Else.
Thank you, Chairman. During Peter's excellent presentation on the asset management, he quite rightly placed great import on tenants' aspirations and tenants' needs, etc. And it just seems to me that are we missing a trick by not having customer satisfaction, repairs, etc. covered in our work programme? I'm interested in understanding how tenants are perceiving the service and the performance and satisfaction levels. But is that something that we should be looking at, do you think?
So that will be covered in the quarterly performance report, at least at a high level, which we ducked out of this month. It was offered to us and we decided at the pre-meeting that we had plenty on the agenda to cover without looking at a report that is actually 4 months old because of the challenges of getting data together in time. It wasn't ready for our last meeting and it's now 4 months old. So you've had it circulated. It's there to look at. But would you want more than is available in the quarterly performance figures?
Well, as I said, I'm interested more in the tenants, their satisfaction survey, if you like, which I know we do. But I just wonder if it's something that we should just discuss at some point.
Okay.
I don't have any axe to grind it over it. I'm just keen. I mean, the tenants are the reason that the houses are there, and they're the most important thing, really, on our agenda at any one time. So. It would just be nice to have a look at that area.
Yeah, that doesn't seem unreasonable. Annalisa, is there something you could pull together briefly to bring to us either at the next meeting or in the summer on the way that our tenants are viewing the current repair situation?
Chair, it's Hugh.
Yeah.
Within our service plan, we did postpone it from last year, is to do a satisfaction survey, what we call the STAR satisfaction survey. And some committee members may remember that we looked to survey a higher percentage of the tenants. I must admit, at least Annalise and myself haven't discussed it, whether it's practical to do it this year. I think that we should do it. We're now nearly probably 4 years since we did the last survey. And that's and then to reassure Councillor Else, that's a really important, a lot of data that we've used to actually prioritise where we should spend the money in terms of the budgets that we've talked about, i.e. spending the money on the curb appeal of our properties. That's where we changed our investment after the last STAR survey. So we regularly use data, feedback from tenants, and we think that's very important. And really, I think we need to confirm at the next meeting that we are going to go ahead with that. We think it's practical to go ahead with the survey this new financial year.
Okay, so does that address what you were thinking of, or were you just concerned with the routine feedback from repairs as they're carried out?
Partly that, yes. I mean, I think as members, what we get is the moans, isn't it, all the time? And it would be nice to know that that the moans aren't there's more satisfied tenants out there than dissatisfied. It would just be nice to have some way of looking at that and measuring that.
So can we ask that a very brief summary of the routine feedback from ongoing repairs is provided at the next meeting, which doesn't have a huge agenda at the moment, I think, and together with thoughts on the potential for a STAR survey, which is the next level up and far more complex and worthwhile.
Yeah, I think that's quite good timing, so we can come with what we propose for the STAR survey, which I think will also link in with the asset management strategy as well, because that's where we're going to get a lot of data of where tenants' aspirations are, what their needs are, what their dissatisfactions are, what we're doing well. As Councillor Else, we do things well as things going wrong. So I think that's very important.
Yeah,
thank you.
And actually, at the next meeting, we'll have the 3Q QPR, and you can probably just build the discussion I've just asked for on the back of that, rather than possibly have a separate item. Don't want to overcomplicate it, but I think that gets us there. Right, Louise, thank you very much. Thanks for leading that. We've finished. Thank you very much, everybody. I thought that was a pretty good meeting. There was a lot of complex stuff to get through. Many thanks to all of the officers, particularly those that were involved in preparing the budget. That could have been a lot more painful than it was. We should be prepared to take the pain if necessary, but it was, I thought, pretty well presented. In fact, both the presentations that we had this evening were very clear, very erudite, and they helped enormously. So thank you very much, officers. Thank you, colleagues. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, officers.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.